Good morning, dear learners. I am Dr. Shahabuddin Ahamed, Assistant Professor, Guest Faculty in the Department of English at Pandit Sundarlal Sarma Open University, Chhattisgarh, India. Today, I will discuss the topic a diasporic study of Jhumpa Lahiri's The Namesake. I will explore how the novel illuminates the experiences of Indian immigrants living in the US. We look at identity, belonging, and cultural conflicts and how these themes appear through the Ganguly family. To begin with, that is the introduction, diaspora and identity in contemporary literature. The term diaspora originates from the Greek word diasporio. It means to scatter or to sow over. Today, the term diaspora broadly refers to migration, displacement, and the complex negotiation of cultural identity across border. That is to say, how people living away from their homeland, how they facing cultural, social, personal challenges in the host society. Diaspora in literature explores how identity is shaped by migration and how identity is shaped by living in a new cultural environment. Jhumpa Lahiri's The Namesake is a seminal diasporic novel. The novel shows how Indian immigrants and their children live in the USA, how they deal with diasporic life in the host country, that is the USA. The main question we explore is how diaspora shape identity, belonging, and cultural conflicts in the novel The Namesake. This question helps us understand how first generation immigrants adapt to a new society, how second generation children struggle with dual cultural identity, how culture, family, personal choice create conflict for the diasporic characters living in the host society. Now turning to next slide, the Ganguly family, embodiment of diasporic experience. Lahiri's novel focuses on multi-generational Ganguly family. This family is a Bengali family. This family is from Calcutta. This family living in the US. The Ganguly family experiences reflect the broader Indian American diaspora. The struggles of each family members provide distinctive perspectives on cultural identity, cultural negotiation, and adaptation to a new host cultural society. In this novel, Ashok and Asima Ganguly, they are first generation Bengali immigrants. Ashok and Asima Ganguly are deeply rooted in Bengali culture, that is Indian culture. Ashok and Asima Ganguly gradually adapt to American life. Before adapting to American life, they face multiple challenges, that is homesickness, isolation, alienation, language and cultural differences. Despite these challenges, they constantly try to balance Indian cultural tradition with the new one, that is American. So their experience represents the foundational trauma of displacement, emotional struggles of being immigrant in a new society, host society. Their story sets the foundation for the second generation children. Second generation children face identity crisis and cultural conflict. For example, Google Ganguly, the second generation Bengali immigrant. Google Ganguly is the son of Ashok and Asima. Google Ganguly is born in America. He grows up between two cultures, one Indian heritage, another the host culture, that is American culture. Google Ganguly undergoes identity crisis as he is caught between two cultures, Indian cultural heritage and American upbringing. Google Ganguly feels disconnected from his Indian heritage. Google faces confusion over his unusual name. He tries to find his own identity apart from his parents' cultures. His name symbolizing his broader identity crisis and his search for belonging, search for identity. His life shows how second generation immigrants often feel neither fully Indian nor fully American. That is the condition of in-betweenness. Gogol thus embodies the conflicted identity of the diasporic second generation. His struggle is central to understanding diasporic identity. Another character, Sonia Ganguly. Sonia Ganguly is Gogol's sister. Sonia adjusts in her own way. Sonia balances Indian heritage and American life. Sonia negotiates cultural hybridity in her own way. Mausumi is Gogol's friend and beloved. Mausumi struggles with expectation of family love and independence. She represents the challenges of cultural duality. These characters embody different stages of cultural assimilation and cultural negotiation in diaspora. Each character shows different challenges of living between two different cultures. One is native culture or cultural baggage, and another is new culture, that is host culture. So, in this way, diaspora creates multiple forms of identity and belonging even within one family. Moving to the slide, naming as a metaphor for identity conflict. In the novel The Namesake, Jhumpa Lahiri uses the idea of naming as a powerful symbol to explore identity conflict, especially in the life of Gogol Ganguly. Gogol's name is unusual and culturally unfamiliar in both Indian and American context. In Indian society, the name Gogol lacks traditional cultural meaning. In America, the name Gogol sounds strange, foreign, and because of his name, Gogol often feels different, isolated. He feels confused about his origin, about where he belongs. That's why his identity crisis happens. His name marks him culturally other. In America, it means he does not fully belong to either culture. He is neither fully Indian nor fully American. That's why his name serves as a powerful symbol of cultural dislocation and personal alienation. Lahiri implies naming to explore the tension between cultural heritage, that is family culture, tradition, and self-definition, that is personal choice, identity, and independence in diasporic subjects. For example, Google's parents value tradition and emotional attachment to the name. However, Google wants to define himself on his own terms. That's why conflict happens. And this conflict reflects a common problem faced by diasporic individuals, diasporic subjects, especially second generation immigrants like Gogol Ganguly. Gogol changes his name to Nikhil in an attempt to escape discomfort. Gogol changes his name because of his desire for acceptance, because of his attempt to become more American. That's why he changes his name from Gogol to Nikhil. The slide suggests that changing external identity cannot easily resolve Gogol's identity problem. As Gogol matures, he begins to understand the emotional value of his name. He realizes that his name connects him to his father's past, to his father's cultural sensibility, and his family's history and his diasporic identity. That's why he accepts his name. Eventually, Google's accept his name and his dual cultural identity. And Google's acceptance of his name parallels his gradual reconciliation with his dual identity. And this represents Google's maturity and cultural integration. That is to say, how his acceptance of his name represents his personal growth, his maturity, and his cultural integration, cultural reconciliation. In this slide, I will focus on cultural displacement and silent struggles. Whilst Gogol's struggle is visible and vocal, Lahiri also highlights the silent suffering of first generation immigrants, especially Asima, and Asima represents the first generation immigrant experience. Her struggle is internal, her struggle is emotional, her struggle is not openly exposed. Asima experiences deep loneliness, cultural isolation, cultural alienation, emotional emptiness, emotional distance from her homeland, India. After her arrival in America, she experiences such isolation, loneliness, emotional distance. Ashima constantly longs for Calcutta, her home in India, and her nostalgia, her longing for Calcutta manifests in everyday small rituals such as preparing Bengali food, maintaining Indian rituals and traditions, remembering family, celebrating festivals, and the familiar rhythm of home. So, these acts help her maintain a sense of cultural identity in a foreign land. Unlike Gogol, Asima fights her battles silently because her struggle is emotional, internal, psychic. Thus, her memory and ritual become tools for emotional survival. Lahiri uses silence as a powerful narrative technique, and Asima's silence represents cultural displacement, emotional burden, and immigrant endurance, immigrant resilience. It captures what cannot be easily articulated. That is the case with Asima Ganguly's experience in the USA as a diasporic subject. This slide explores generational conflict and hybrid identities. The first generation clings to Indian cultural tradition. The second generation grows up American. This cultural gap creates conflict and misunderstanding. For example, Google is torn between rejecting and accepting his cultural heritage, his Indian heritage. Google feels neither fully Indian nor fully American. Google's journey between rejection and acceptance of his heritage maps the classic diasporic struggle, that is, neither fully Indian nor fully American. Based on the post-colonial critic Homi K. Bhabha's idea of liminality, Jhumpa Lahiri explores hybrid identity formation. It is an in-between cultural space, a creative possibility, and a negotiation of two cultural space, or living between two different cultures. That's why it is an in-between cultural space. Next, themes of belonging and alienation. The term in-betweenness refers to immigrants living between two different cultures. As a result, immigrants never fully belong to either homeland or hostland. The immigrants' perpetual sense of in-betweenness, never fully belonging to homeland or host country. That's why they belong to in-betweenness. They are living in a hybrid space or liminal space. The term nostalgia functions as a double-edged sword. Nostalgia offering both comfort and pain. Nostalgia sustaining connection to immigrants' roots while intensifying their loss and displacement. That means how immigrants sustain their connection to their cultural roots through nostalgia, while at the same time they undergo loss and cultural displacement. Through the Gangulis, Lahiri portrays the universal human desire for belonging and identity, and such identity goes beyond fixed or particular culture. Next slide, cross-cultural conflict and assimilation. In a diasporic context, immigrants live between two different cultures. They face multiple challenges in negotiating cultural norms, language barriers, they face multiple challenges. So, what are the challenges? The challenges are new cultural norms, language barriers, religious practices, and new cultural value systems within multicultural society. That is to say, how immigrants are trying to adjust to a new society while trying not to lose their own cultural identity, that is native cultural identity, original identity. In this novel, the Gangulis struggle with differences in language, food, values, and social norms. And these differences affect their relationship, and these relationships create misunderstanding between parents and children, because parents belong to first generation immigrants and children belong to second generation immigrant. For example, Ashok and Asima follow traditional Indian values while their children Google resist arranged marriage and prefers a relationship based on American ideals. Language makes immigrants isolated, but over time, language helps them communicate and adapt to American society. This is the case with Asima Ganguly. She gradually communicates in English and she adapts to American society. Religious observance and adaptation. The Gangulis adjust their religious practices to suit life in the US. It shows how immigrants adapt without fully abandoning their own tradition, native tradition. Professional identity formation. Career choice reflects assimilation, meaning how immigrants adapt themselves to a new cultural society, new cultural environment. So, for professional identity formation, for career choice, Google desired to belong to US society even though he struggles with his cultural roots. Asima struggles to adjust to an American life while Google finds Indian tradition restrictive, and Google's professional life reflects his desire to fit American life while still trying to preserve parents' cultural beliefs. In this way, cross cultural conflict happens and the character face such cross cultural conflict in their everyday life in the host society in the US. In the slide, focusing on some scholarly perspectives on the novel, many scholars view the novel as an important diasporic novel that explores identity, trauma, and memory in diasporic context. Lahiri presents the immigrant experience in a deeply psychological way. The novel highlights immigrant mental trauma because characters feel loneliness, cultural confusion, and emotional displacement, especially when they are caught between two cultures. From a global cultural perspective, the namesake is significant because it reflects modern migration and cultural hybridity. The novel helps readers understand how identity is shaped in a globalized post colonial world. To conclude, Jhumpa Lahiri's novel The Namesake is a profound study of diaspora. The novel shows how identity, family, culture interact across generations within the immigrant experience. From a diasporic perspective, the novel teaches us that belonging is not physical but also emotional and psychological process. And belonging is shaped by memory, multiple relationships and negotiations and self acceptance. The novel illuminates the silent struggles and resilience of diasporic individuals. The novel gives voice to the unspoken subjects, the novel making the diasporic experience both intimate and universal. Through the experiences of the Ganguly family, Lahiri reveals in her novel how identity in the diaspora remains contested, fluid, flexible, and evolving. What makes the novel enduring is its focus on everyday struggles that the diasporic subjects experience than dramatic conflict. The novel invites readers to develop empathy for immigrant lives. It invites readers to understand the complex nature of cultural belonging, cultural identity, cultural displacement in a diasporic space in a globalized post-colonial world. Thank you, dear learners, for your attentive engagement. I welcome any question or comment from you.